how a hidden backroom deal nearly destroyed me. An authentic memoir of rebuilding from scratch, achieving silent revenge through relentless effort, and ultimately turning away those who betrayed me. From my earliest memories, I believe that loyalty was the strongest currency in life. I invested my trust freely, organizing late-night brainstorming sessions with classmates, lending a hand on every group project, treating every promise as sacred. I thought that standing by one another through adversity would bind us like steel. When I entered university, I poured myself into a shared vision, a fledgling startup fueled by our collective ambition. I handled the logistics, balanced the spreadsheets, and persuaded investors to listen. I believed in the unity of our little team until the day I discovered the emails. Hidden threads of negotiations, haggle percentages, and financial terms that mentioned me only in passing. I felt the floor give way beneath my feet. Those I considered friends had been quietly cutting me out, stripping away my contributions like pages torn from a book. The shock settled into a cold fury. I replayed every late night I'd spent drafting proposals, every risk I'd shouldered on their behalf. Their betrayal tasted like ash. In that moment, I vowed to myself that I would not merely survive their treachery, I would transcend it. I would build something they could never touch, something so formidable that when they returned in need, I could choose to offer forgiveness or leave them staring at my closed door. I left the broken remnants of our startup behind. I watched as they scrambled to salvage what remained, scrambling through the ruins of our shared dream. Meanwhile, I leaned into solitude, channeled my anger into a new plan, and carved out hours at a time to sharpen my skills, coding past midnight, pitching to distant mentors, reading every business memoir I could find. I was relentless. By the time they realized I was gone, I had already planted the seeds of my success elsewhere. Their silent apologies and hot-off-the-press invitations to reconnect arrived too late. But that was an engagement for another day. For now, my path lay ahead, a quiet crusade of self-made triumph, fueled by betrayal and the resolve to remain unbowed. In the depths of that winter, I discovered a truth more powerful than any pact of friendship. Revenge is sweetest when it unfolds without haste, one victory at a time. In the weeks after my abrupt departure, I became a silhouette in the early morning glow of the city skyline. While they wrestled with legal entanglements over our shared venture, I immersed myself in code and commerce with the single-minded devotion of a monk in prayer. My betrayal forged a relentless discipline. I rose at dawn to read market analyses, assemble prototypes in borrowed workspaces, and pitch my fledgling idea to anyone who would listen. Even strangers on park benches, heads bowed over laptops. Each rejection tightened the coil of my resolve. When an investor dismissed me for lacking proven loyalty, I translated their sneer into focus and adjusted my pitch. When a mentor cautioned that I was too raw to lead a team alone, I treated their words as a challenge, spending nights refining my leadership framework until every facet gleamed. My solitude swung between the buoyancy of newfound freedom and the ache of loss. The fuel of my ambition was balanced precariously between ambition and the ghost of camaraderie. By late winter, whispers began to circulate about my progress. A simple app, born from a single headache I'd endured during my startup's collapse, began to gain traction among niche users. It solved a real problem, streamlining time, wasting tasks I'd once managed manually for my old partners. I watched user counts climb in real time, heart-pounding as each new download registered. The same network that had once frozen me out now tracked my every move, curious and alarmed. I remained silent. I did not taunt them, nor did I share my triumphs on social media. I moved through this ascent like an unseen tide, inexorable and quietly unstoppable. Their occasional inquiries, text messages marked urgent, private emails, sat unopened in my inbox. I allowed the suspense to build, a slow burn of anticipation that would make my success all the more vivid when the moment of reckoning arrived. In that hush between betrayal and retribution, I discovered the most potent form of payback, transformation. I shed my old self, the one who equated loyalty with entitlement, and embraced the shape of my future. The road ahead was not merely about outshining those who had wronged me, but about becoming so indispensable that my absence would become their greatest regret. And so I pressed on, one calculated step at a time. Spring arrived like a promise I had earned through toil. My app, once a fleeting experiment, had evolved into a robust platform embraced by entrepreneurs and freelancers alike. I watched the dashboards light up with metrics I'd once tracked obsessively in spreadsheets: active users, retention rates, revenue growth. Each milestone whispered of progress, yet echoed with an emptiness I intentionally cultivated, the hollow absence of shared celebration. In those quiet mornings, I polished features and secured partnerships with industry leaders. I sat through virtual board meetings, commanding respect in a tone forged from past betrayals. I negotiated contracts that would have seemed impossible months earlier. With every handshake sealed by video conference, I felt the weight of old alliances crumble further beneath me. Still, I never broadcasted my assent. Instead, I allowed the ripple effect to play out organically. Rumors reached my former teammates. Whispers of a competitor who'd solved the very bottlenecks they struggled to fix. Rumors of seed round oversubscriptions with investors clamoring for a slice. I observed this from the sidelines, savoring the slow unraveling of their certainty. Then came the first request, a carefully worded email from one of them, bearing the same signature I once recognized without thought. They claimed to be exploring renewed synergies and sought advice on user acquisition. I read the message twice, imagining how they'd sounded in our shared office. Confident, dismissive, convinced of my loyalty even as they plotted behind my back. I drafted a reply in my mind, polite, succinct, final. I pictured the cursor hovering above the send button, the digital barrier between us closing with a single click. For a moment, I felt the old ache of abandonment, the confusing mix of guilt and anger that once threatened to break me. But I quelled it, reminding myself that forgiveness could wait until I chose to extend it. So I did nothing. I archived their message and turned my attention back to a new feature roadmap. The silence itself was my answer, an unspoken boundary they'd breached, now firmly restored. And in that silence, I tasted the first true sweetness of revenge. Not in spite, but in the power to withhold. Spring's thaw carried a different promise. Not renewal of friendships, but the emergence of my own empire. As the world budded, I nurtured my fledgling platform into something formidable. My mornings began with coffee-steamed determination, scrolling through international user feedback while the sun rose behind me. My days blurred between strategy calls with overseas partners and late-night debugging sessions, each success layering over the wounds of betrayal. I found strange comfort in metrics. Watching revenue climb, I felt a quiet jubilation that had nothing to do with wealth. It was the proof that I could build something lasting on my own terms. Every new investor I impressed, every feature my team launched, was a subtle echo of the promises once broken. With each milestone, my heartbeat found a steadier rhythm, no longer plagued by the anxiety of hidden agendas. Yet I was careful not to gloat. I cultivated anonymity, letting my platform's excellence speak louder than any self-congratulatory announcement. I crafted blog posts about resilience and the value of perseverance, never mentioning my old collaborators. Instead, I framed failures as universal lessons, inviting readers to share in the triumph of overcoming. My story lived in candid case studies, cleverly omitting names but subtly capturing the arc of my own redemption. My network expanded organically. Invitations to speak at conferences arrived, not because of my past affiliations, but because of the authenticity of my insights. On stage, I recounted the universal pain of betrayal and the power of solitude, never revealing the faces that had cut me out, but allowing the audience to sense the depth of my journey. Their applause was a balm, and for the first time, I felt celebrated for who I had become, rather than mourned for who I'd lost. Behind the scenes, I watched, almost imperceptibly, as whispers of my success filtered back to my former circle. Social media alerts lit up with mentions of my platform. Mutual contacts casually remarked, "I heard he's doing well." Each murmur was a reminder. I had returned from the ashes of their betrayal, not as a beggar, but as a force they could no longer ignore. And in that quiet inevitability lay the first true tremor of revenge. Summer sun glinted off the floor to ceiling windows of my new office, a space I had painstakingly designed to foster creativity and focus. Each morning, I passed the polished mahogany desk where I'd once collapsed beneath the weight of betrayal, now testament to my resilience. My team, talented, loyal, and untainted, greeted me with genuine admiration, unaware of the ghost that had driven me here. My platform's growth was staggering. User registrations doubled every quarter, media outlets heralded our innovative features, and revenue forecasts soared beyond anyone's expectations. Yet, beneath the headlines lay a deeper satisfaction. The knowledge that every triumph echoed the faces that had turned away from me. Their indifference had been my catalyst, their deception, the fuel for my relentless ascent. As autumn approached, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. The subject line carried a hint of desperation, seeking your guidance. The sender was unmistakable, the very colleague who had spearheaded the clandestine negotiations that stole my stake in the original venture. He wrote of mounting obstacles, a struggling startup on the brink of collapse, and a plea for mentorship from someone who clearly understood the industry better. I read his words twice. I pictured the wide-eyed confidence he once wore, the casual dismissals of my ideas, the private smirks exchanged behind my back. A surge of cold triumph coursed through me. Here it was, the moment I'd envisioned in long nights of coding and planning. I crafted my response carefully, polite but final. I acknowledged receipt, wished him well, and offered a single sentence of advice. Your journey now belongs to you. I hit send and leaned back. No elaboration, no false hope, just the closure I had earned. Within minutes, his follow-ups arrived. Urgent reminders, nostalgic references to the good old days, even veiled threats of legal action. I ignored them all. The silence from my end spoke louder than any rebuttal I could have penned. In that quiet refusal, I felt a profound vindication. My vengeance was neither loud nor vindictive. It was the power to withhold the very thing they craved, connection to the success they had cast aside. And with that, I stepped fully into the new chapter of my life, one I'd built entirely on my own terms. Autumn's crisp air carried the scent of possibility, and my mornings began with the gentle hum of ambition rather than the jarring sting of betrayal. I walked into the office each day aware of my own metamorphosis. The broken dreamer who had once clung to promises was replaced by a leader forging reality from code and conviction. Our user community swelled, and every positive testimonial felt like a silent applause for the battles I'd fought in solitude. Yet beyond the glowing reviews and investor smiles, a subtler drama played out. Former teammates circulated through my digital periphery, an occasional mention in industry newsletters, a tentative request for data access, or an indirect inquiry via mutual contacts. Each attempt to breach my walls was greeted with the same deliberate stillness. I read their messages, let the cursor hover, then archived without reply. Their persistence dwindled as they realized my success was no door they could reopen. In the evenings, I often paused at the rooftop terrace of our new headquarters, gazing at the city lights that mirrored the constellation of opportunities I'd mapped for myself. I remembered late-night conversations with investors, times they doubted my capacity to thrive alone. Now those doubts glowed behind me like fading stars. I felt a quiet euphoria in knowing I had made myself indispensable, a linchpin in an enterprise they once dismissed. The true sweetness of revenge, I discovered, lay not in dramatic confrontations, but in the mastery of one's own destiny. While they struggled with dwindling funding rounds and erratic user retention, I fine-tuned my product roadmap, expanded our service offerings, and cultivated a culture of genuine collaboration. My office buzzed with creative energy, theirs echoed with awkward silences. Then, as winter's first frost settled over the city, a final outreach arrived, this time from the lead investor they'd once championed me to meet. He admitted regret, confessed he had misjudged the team dynamics, and asked to explore potential partnerships. I stared at his email, mind tracing the arc from promise to betrayal to triumph. With one keystroke, I declined curtly. Our paths have diverged. I closed my laptop, feeling a profound calm. The past no longer weighed on my shoulders. It had become the bedrock of my resilience. In refusing their entreaties, I reclaimed the narrative entirely, no longer defined by others' choices, but by the unwavering power of my own. Winter deepened, yet inside me burned a warmth born of purpose rather than revenge. I awoke each morning to a rising tide of notifications. Press mentions, user feedback, and partnership proposal from organizations I had once only dreamed of joining. The platform I'd painstakingly nurtured was no longer a mere side project. It had become an industry standard, a tool so integral that competitors scrambled to replicate its simplicity and power. I moved through these milestones with the quiet grace of someone who understood that true victory required neither fanfare nor vindictiveness. My team and I celebrated each success in subtle ways, an impromptu gathering around a whiteboard, laughter echoing as we sketched future innovations, a shared milestone cake in the break room, decorated with hand-drawn icons of our logo. These moments reminded me that the best retribution was not lashing out, but enriching the lives of those who believed in me and those I served. Late one afternoon, I received a formal invitation to speak at an international tech expo. The conference brochure featured my name alongside industry titans, a testament to how far I'd risen. Knowing that some of my former collaborators would be in the audience, perhaps hoping for a glimpse of my downfall, I accepted with measured enthusiasm. When the day arrived, I stepped onto the stage under a spotlight that felt both surreal and vindicating. I spoke about resilience, about transforming pain into progress, without a single reference to past betrayals. I shared metrics and anecdotes that highlighted our platform's impact, how small nonprofits had saved thousands of volunteer hours, how solo entrepreneurs reclaimed their work-life balance. The applause that followed was not for a story of vengeance, but for an ethos of empowerment, an affirmation that I had transcended the bitterness that once threatened to consume me. Backstage, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. the colleague who had first orchestrated my ousting. His expression flickered between awe and regret as he approached, offering a weak smile. I returned it with a nod. No warmth, no recriminations, just the calm recognition that I was no longer tethered to his judgments. As I exited the venue, I realized that the true culmination of my revenge had already been written, not in heated exchanges or public shaming, but in the unassailable strength of my own reinvention. The old bonds lay dissolved beneath the weight of my achievements, and in that liberation, I discovered a power far greater than any grudge could grant. By the time winter thawed into early spring, my company's headquarters had outgrown its original loft space and settled into a sleek high-rise overlooking the river. I still marveled at the journey each morning, buzzing elevators, bright brainstorming rooms, digital maps, tracking global usage. The man who once scrawled notes on crumpled napkins had become the architect of a thriving ecosystem. Yet success did not dull the memory of betrayal. It sharpened my awareness of every knock at the door and ping in my inbox. Sporadic messages from my former collaborators trickled in, each more contrived than the last. Invitations to share insights, appeals for industry introductions, subtle hints that they regretted sidelining me. I did not reply. Instead, I filed them under archived, a virtual mausoleum of broken promises and squandered loyalties. The turning point arrived on a gray April afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly forecasts when an email with the subject line, "Personal request," slid into view. The sender was unmistakable, the colleague who had pocketed my equity and soared on my original concept. His note was a polite plea. His own startup was hemorrhaging talent, investors had pulled out, and he needed my guidance to navigate a looming collapse. He invoked memories of shared vision and what we once built together, as if nostalgia could absolve his treachery. My eyes lingered on the screen, tracing the carefully chosen words. I thought of the late nights he ignored, the profits he rerouted, and the silent prices I'd paid after he orchestrated my exit. A faint smile touched my lips, not of mercy, but of quiet triumph. I realized that vengeance did not require a dramatic confrontation. It could live in a measured pause between his plea and my denial. So I closed his email without typing a single word. No reprimand, no lecture, only the quiet assertion of my autonomy. In that stillness, I understood that the purest retribution was the victory of indifference, to stand apart, unshaken, while they grasped at shadows. And as I turned back to my forecasts, I felt a profound serenity, the knowledge that I had transcended their betrayal, not through retaliation, but through the unassailable strength of my own success. Early summer brought with it the culmination of a strategy one had cultivated in silence. I had spent months refining a premium tier of my platform, an enterprise package custom-built for larger teams, complete with analytics dashboards, dedicated support, and seamless integrations. I knew precisely when to launch. The moment my former collaborator's own product roadmap stalled in development, beset by funding shortfalls and internal discord. On a Monday morning, I released the enterprise tier with a targeted email campaign. My message was concise and confident, an invitation to unlock the full potential of your workflow. Within hours, several industry leaders signed on, instantly doubling our projected quarterly revenue. Public announcements followed on Tuesday, a polished press release, strategic social posts, glowing early testimonials. The echo of success rippled through the market, making it impossible for anyone to ignore that a superior solution now existed. Meanwhile, I watched the fallout. My inbox brimmed, not with celebratory congratulation from friends. Those doors had long since closed, but with frantic inquiries from former teammates. They begged for beta access, offered equity in exchange for guidance, even suggested joint ventures to save face. Their tone was urgent, pleading, as if by reconnecting with me, they could reclaim lost ground. I drafted a courteous auto-response. Thank you for your interest. At this time, we aren't extending invitations beyond our current partnerships. Wishing you success. I activated it, and the replies flooded in, each one a testament to the power of timing, execution, and unwavering resolve. In the days that followed, industry blogs dissected the pivot, how a once obscure founder had eclipsed competitors through decisive product leadership. My former circle saw their own market share erode while mine flourished. They had underestimated my capacity not only to build, but to strike precisely when their vulnerabilities peaked. Late one evening, I reviewed the analytics dashboard. Adoption rates climbed, churn rates plummeted. I realized that the sweetest victory was not in their pleading messages, but in the market's unequivocal verdict. I closed my laptop, feeling a quiet triumph. I had transformed betrayal into momentum, resentment into innovation, and in doing so, I had rewritten the very rules of engagement. My revenge was complete, and it tasted of success. Update 1. By midsummer, The momentum of my success had coalesced into undeniable power. My enterprise tier launch had delivered its coup de grace. Competitors scrambled to match our features, while my former colleagues found themselves scrambling for relevance. That afternoon, a flurry of urgent emails arrived. Pleas for collaboration, invitations to strategic discussions, even thinly veiled offers of equity. They spoke of shared heritage and what we once built, as though invoking nostalgia might erase their betrayal. I sat at my desk, sunbeams cutting through the blinds, illuminating the contract I was drafting with a Fortune 500 client. The contrast between their desperation and my calm confidence felt striking. I recalled the discarded cold call scripts I'd once written for them, the countless hours I'd spent troubleshooting their prototypes, now repurposed to build my own empire. In that moment, I experienced the purest distillation of revenge, withholding the mentorship and access they had once taken for granted. No dramatic confrontation, no public denouncement, only the deliberate choice to close the door. I archived their messages and turned back to work, each keystroke reinforcing the barrier between their imploring and my silence. The biggest irony was that by refusing to engage, I had enacted a kind of mercy. I denied them the satisfaction of quarrel. Instead, I let their requests collect digital dust, a testament to how far they'd underestimated my capacity, both to build and to let go. The hum of my keyboard felt triumphant. I did not gloat, but I savored the clarity of my decision. In a world defined by transactions and alliances, I had discovered that the most potent asset was my autonomy. Their pleas receded into insignificance, replaced by new invitations from clients who valued what I'd created. And as the afternoon light shifted, I understood that vengeance had taken its final form, the freedom to choose silence over entanglement. By autumn's onset, the fallout from my refusal had rippled through the industry. News outlets highlighted the meteoric rise of my platform, contrasting it with the faltering trajectory of my old collaborators. Where once they had scoffed at my departure, they now found themselves scrambling to pivot, pursuing half-baked features and reactive rebrands. Each press release they issued felt defensive, hollow in comparison to my confident proclamations of future growth. In the quiet hours before dawn, I reviewed our latest user metrics. Global engagement up 25%, enterprise renewals at an all-time high, and a healthy pipeline of strategic partnerships. The numbers glowed on the screen like embers of vindication. I reflected on the path that had brought me here, the sting of their backroom dealings, the endless nights of self-directed study, the slow burn of transformation. Betrayal had been the crucible in which my purpose was forged. Yet something subtle had shifted beneath the surface of my triumph, a gentle easing of the tension I'd carried for so long. The initial rush of power had given way to a more nuanced satisfaction. I recognized that my true victory was not simply surpassing them, but transcending the cycle of resentment. By building a community grounded in mutual respect, I had replaced the toxic bonds of my past with healthier connections, partnerships based on transparency and shared vision. Still, reminders of the old wounds lingered. I stumbled upon a guest post from one of my former teammates, lamenting the missing spark since my departure. Their words, tinged with regret, sounded like echoes from another lifetime. I closed the tab without comment. Their struggle no longer mattered. My focus had shifted to nurturing the ecosystem I'd created. In that quiet refocusing, I grasped the essence of resolution. True empowerment comes not from retaliation, but from rewriting your own story. Winter settled over the city, frosting the skyline in muted silver. Inside my office, however, the atmosphere crackled with the warmth of ambition fulfilled. I stood by the window one evening, coffee in hand, gazing at the neon reflection of my platform's logo across the glass towers. The journey from betrayal to mastery felt both distant and immediate, as though the boy who once clung to promises had been replaced by a man who now led with conviction. In the final months, I had woven routines of reflection into my schedule, weekly reviews of product roadmaps, monthly retreats to recharge with my team, quarterly vision board sessions charting our collective dreams. These rituals had become my true revenge against the chaos of the past, frameworks of consistency and purpose that no backroom betrayal could dismantle. I felt gratitude for the adversity that had ignited my relentless pursuit of excellence. And yet, a subtle melancholy lingered at the edges of my triumph. I acknowledged that success had its own price. The silence of old friendships, the absence of those who once shared my earliest dreams. But even this void carried a lesson, that sometimes the greatest acts of self-preservation require letting go. I had mourned the illusions of loyalty, only to discover the deeper truths of self-reliance and authenticity. As snowfall drifted outside, I made a quiet promise to myself. to build bridges where trust could flourish anew, to mentor emerging founders without reservation, and to honor the journey that shaped me. Revenge had guided me through the storm, but resolution lay in extending my hand forward rather than turning back. With that oath, I closed another chapter, one that marked not only the end of vengeance, but the beginning of a legacy defined by empowerment. Update 2. With the new year came a renewed sense of direction. I launched an open-source initiative, inviting developers worldwide to contribute to our core codebase. This gesture of collaboration stood in stark contrast to the isolation that had once fueled my ascent. By sharing knowledge freely, I reinforced the value of collective growth over guarded advantage. In late January, a former teammate reached out one last time. This time not with pleas for help, but with genuine congratulations on our community project. I responded with warmth, acknowledging his achievements and offering a spotlight in our contributor newsletter. It was the first time I extended a hand, not out of necessity, but from a place of confidence. This act crystallized my evolution, from vengeful strategist to empowered leader. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer dictated my choices. I understood that true strength lay in generosity, in transforming past wounds into opportunities for others. My legacy would be not a tale of retribution, but a testament to resilience and reinvention. Spring's arrival found me mentoring a cohort of aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing hard-won lessons about trust, transparency, and perseverance. As I guided them through pitch decks and growth strategies, I realized how far I'd come, from a betrayed founder to a steward of shared success. Each question they asked reminded me of the doubts I once carried, and each insight I offered reaffirmed my commitment to uplift rather than undermine. In a quiet celebration at the season's end, our open-source community honored me with a symbolic key of collaboration, a digital emblem representing our shared code and collective achievements. Holding that virtual key, I felt an indescribable fulfillment. Revenge had faded into the background, replaced by the richer melody of mutual empowerment. On the eve of my company's 5th anniversary, I stood before our global team, employees, contributors, and partners, under a banner proclaiming, "Together, we build tomorrow." I recounted the early days of betrayal only briefly, then shifted focus to the values that had guided our journey: integrity, empathy, and relentless innovation. As I concluded, applause erupted, not for revenge, but for the vision we'd realized together. In that moment, I knew the true measure of my journey, not the victories over those who wronged me, but the bridges I'd forged afterward. Betrayal had ignited my transformation, but it was compassion and collaboration that sustained my legacy. The boy who once equated loyalty with entitlement had become a man who understood that the greatest triumph is empowering others to rise alongside you.